IVM.
This is Storytellers and Story Sellers. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar on the IVM Podcast Network. The business of independent music in India has come a long way from the Bollywood-dominated days of the previous decades. Indie music specifically is turning more and more viable for musicians. A couple of weeks ago, I talked to Dhruv Singh from Pagal Haina, and we talked about building up epic indie acts like Pratik, Kuhad and Peter Cat Recording Company. Check out that episode if you haven't. To continue my exploration of the extant indie music scene, today I'm talking to Soumini Sridhara Paul, VP at Hungama and the woman behind the 10-year-old digital music platform Artist Aloud. Soumini has spent over 20 years repping musicians, creating revenue streams and launching albums. Delighted to have you on the show today, Soumini, to talk about the independent music scene. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and thank you so much for having me on this. I think I felt extremely privileged when I got the mail saying, we'd like to do a session with you. So I think really nice. Feels privileged.
I'm glad you feel that way. It's always good to have people coming in on a podcast and talking about stuff because, like I mentioned to you just before we started, it's a medium that allows for a detailed and expansive conversation. And I have so much to ask you.
Sure.
So let me get started by introducing you to our guest a little bit, right? How about you tell us about your journey? I know you ran your own artist management company, then you were a producer for a while, and now you've spent about 11 odd years at Hungama, specifically with Artist Aloud. Talk us through that.
Okay, so let me go back to the beginning. I was always singing when I was in school. I was part of the choir. My college was Xavier's, so, Xavier's has such a great culture when it comes to music.
Absolutely.
And Malhar was, the place that you would want to get yourself noticed. So I used to, of course, participate every year in the inter-college competitions. And, of course, the ones that used to happen, like we had the rounds that used to happen within our college to identify who's going to represent the college. I used to always be in competition with Samantha Edward, and obviously she's the one who would always get selected because she was brilliant even then. But yeah, I think music was always a great part of my life. And, of course, I did my graduation in statistics, and that was also because that was possibly the only subject I really understood. I didn't want to kind of...
Stats is the only subject.
Yeah, because it was logical, right?
Sure.
I mean, yeah, it kind of applied logic, and I've realized that my life has become more about if it is logical, it's doable.
Right.
So I think that's something that I took away from stat.
Great mantra there.
Yeah, the first time I actually thought of that, but yeah, thanks. So, I graduated from Xavier's in 94, and my family had actually moved to Bangalore. So I finished graduation and I moved to Bangalore, and I thought, okay, now, Bangalore is my new destination. I met with this job consultant at that time, and, she was like, so what do you want to do? And I said, look, I wanted to do a master's, but what I've done in Bombay is much better, as in it's a much higher level. So doing a master's in Bangalore would be like more of a repeat, so it didn't make sense to study further.
Right.
So she asked me, okay, what are your interests? I said, music. I've always been in music, And she put me on to Prasad Vidappa, who is the fashion choreographer. And I started doing shows in his fashion shows. We were three of us. There was me, there was another artist called Avril Quadras, and a slightly older lady called Priscilla Connor. We became really good friends. We used to do shows together. We used to travel, and the Mania Airways was a company at that time that was
right.
Pretty big. So we used to do a lot of fashion shows for them. That happened, and in 96, 95 actually, I met with Suresh Thomas from Crescendo. And, I played a demo that I had, and he said, yeah, I think we should sign you on. So I landed up doing one song, which was actually a remix of Raghupati Raghav, which was with Nainaz and Anaida. And there was Bashir Sheikh and Pierce Soni. So that's my, kind of claim to fame, which I can go back to my grandchildren at one time in my life to say, see, your mom did something like this, or your grandmom. Yeah, so that happened. But after a year, we kind of mutually called it off. I was struggling, and I was alone in Mumbai because, obviously I had to be in Mumbai to pursue it. And my mom at that time, I remember, said, she was not for it at all. And I said, no, I'm going to do it on my own, and I should, I want to try this. And a year after my, my whole, the agreement, the contract with the label got called off, I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I went back to Bangalore and I again kind of was trying to figure out. So one of my friends who owned a garment company, he said, if you want to be in Bombay, why don't you come back and I'll give you a job. So I was there for 2 months and my job was to show how a shirt would look on a model's image, which was for export. It had nothing to do with music, and I was dying inside. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I saw the look on your face and you must have been wondering, what the hell?
1 second, we were doing shows. What happened?
Exactly. Right. But, it was, as they say, papi pet ka sawal hai. And, obviously, and I had this thing that if I'm going back to Bombay, I will do it on my own. I have some money that I was going to take from family. But after 2 months, I really felt I was losing it, and I met with this person who was actually my sister's friend, but he was also from the music industry. And we started talking and he said, if you really love music so much, why don't you look at the other side of the music industry? If you can't be an artist, it doesn't have to end there. And I think that line was so beautiful and so simple that it just changed my thinking, So I put together literally a half-pager CV because I had nothing to show for myself. Right. And I sent it out to all the record labels that I had met as an artist. And the only label I hadn't met as an artist was Universal Music. And I landed up getting a call and they said, come and meet Vijay Lazarus and Vinay Sapru. And I joined as a media executive. And at that time, we launched Falguni Pathak's new album. We launched Leslie Lewis's new album. We did a lot of stuff. So I think in that 1.5 to 2 months, I kind of learned the music space, what people possibly would have taken a year to do. There's so much to do. Right. There was in-store branding. And those were the days where cassettes and CDs used to sell. So
Planet M used to be a thing.
Yeah. Even in Khar, I don't know if it still exists. There was a place called Audio Junction, which is at Khar Subway. Right. And, so that was a place that we used to spend a lot of time in terms of creating the right kind of POPs and POs, all of that. But it just so happened in those 2 months after I joined Universal, I was at a meeting in Channel V and I met with Mandar Thakur, who essentially was heading music and artist relations. Right. Right. And I think in about 45 minutes that I was sitting in his cabin and talking, he convinced me why I should join Channel V. We didn't even land up talking about what I had actually come there to, So I don't know what he saw in me, which even I didn't know or I didn't realize. And he really turned out to be one of the greatest mentors I could have had, I stayed on in Star for about 4.5 years. He was there for 2 years, the first 2 years. He left and I got elevated to his position. But I think just, he recognized something which I didn't, because I always looked at myself as an artist. Really? And to actually look at myself as somebody who would manage artist relations, it was I don't know. I have no idea what it was. But it was so much fun. We did some great projects together, for the channel with the artists. We did things like Jammin'. That was another one of the most groundbreaking formats, which of course followed with things like Coke Studio and stuff. But that happened for about 4.5 years. And I actually put in my papers because I couldn't handle the politics of working in a corporate. Right. And in that period, Star had taken over Channel V, so it was a very different environment.
So I see a big similarity in what how I grew up as well, right? So when I was younger, I had a band and I used to sing, and we had we did about 50, 70 shows as in college, and then we came to the fourth year when everybody had to go off to wherever, and one of the guys went off to do his journalism at Stanford. Someone else started working at Furtado. So people did their own thing, right? I want to ask you this right at the outset before we talk further about how was that decision, right? When you were making that decision, I know you talked about it being stepping into an unknown sort of a place. Where you're like, hey, till yesterday I was someone who was charting out a career on stage, and now I'm in the green room, or now I'm in the wings, or now I'm in the front row, egging people on or figuring out business solutions for them. How was that decision for you? If we just double click on that, maybe those 20 days or a month or so when you were just going through this decision for yourself.
Right. So I have to tell you, even when I was in college, I was part of a band. It was called Scream, and we used to rehearse in Muskan Talks. So
Scream as in Eric Clapton Scream.
Scream.
Oh, Scream. Okay. Scream.
Yeah. So, and we'd experienced crowds, and that was a time when I think at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, there's another band, I forget their name, who was also coming up with covers and things like that. When I performed in Bangalore for 2 years, I was performing to an audience, and there were different capacities. I opened for Induscreen and Millennium at the Palace Grounds, so that kind of a crowd as well. But I think when I had to change gears and move from an artist to someone who's going to be behind the scenes, I don't think I even had a moment where I was thinking that there was a high when people were, kind of rooting for you or watching you and coming back to you saying, oh, you sing well or you sound great and, blah, blah, blah. But I think when you don't know when your next month's, paycheck is going to come from, none of that matters.
Right.
I just lucked out that for the 3 years I stayed alone in Mumbai, I was staying as a paying guest with this lady who was literally a mother away from a mother. I mean, she was a wonderful person. And, otherwise you hear scary stories of people like leaving their homes and coming into Mumbai and, sleeping in platforms and, having, touch wood, I have had no one in my life so far taken any undue advantage of me being single. I've never had any sexual encounter of any kind. God, thank God for that.
Very fortunate.
Very fortunate. And I think, I always feel like, so when my family moved to Bangalore, they moved because my father passed away in 92. And this might sound a little morbid, but I don't know why. I just believe my dad was looking out. So even if I was on my own, he always got people around me who actually took care of me. So with this lady, she actually turned out to be that. I mean, I used to, in a city like Bombay, people tend to increase rent and paying guest amounts, either every 6 months or a year. She charged me 5,000 rupees per month for 3 years. She didn't change it. Every month. She is a darling. I mean, I love her. And touch wood, I've become very close to her kids as well. So, we stay in touch. But I think that's the point, right? So when you realize it's the reality, But I think for me, at the end of the day, being around music was more important, and not whether it was for me or if I'm part of somebody else's journey. I think today you and me are talking because I must have done something right, to be recognized. So
I think what it really does, and this is again a little bit of my own experience and other people I've seen who've seen, being on stage and being the entertainer and then being people who manage those people. I think there's a lot of empathy that comes. There's a lot of understanding that comes. There's also an ability to cut through artist bullshit that comes. I don't know if you feel that way as well. I mean, those things really obviously add an entirely different dimension to how you approach it. But I love the way you put it, that it was about seeing that happen, and you've clearly done very, very well for yourself.
I'll give you an example, Vineet. When it came to jamming, right? I mean, the kind of artists that we had on the show, there were only 2 people in the company who were actually responsible for that show. There was me in terms of the artist, and there was Deepak Dhar, who was at that time one of the producers.
The Deepak
Dhar. But, hats off to the guy. I think he has really grown his career to a level which has just been through hard work and amazing creativity. There is no taking away from that. And between the two of us, we were pretty much responsible to, from the talent and what came out of that talent. At that time, we were dealing with only the guys who became the biggest names after that. Where it was Shan, Sukhbir, Shankar, Pentagram. All of these people, one thing I've always known about artists and seen about artists, they may have demands, they may have a lot of asks, but they notice work, they notice people taking an effort. What they don't want is bullshit.
Most definitely. I agree.
Yeah. I think the problem is a lot of people love to give the bullshit because, for some reason they believe the artist will take it.
Yeah.
And the artist is just saying, stop giving me the bullshit. Just tell me what it is. If it's bad news, I'm ready to hear it. Just be honest. And I'm going to say this because I have been told by the person directly, but Daleji's wife, Taranpreet, she's always told me, she said, Soumini, you left from Channel V and we've not had that kind of bond ever. with anybody else. And that is all I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, it's work, and it's the ability to leave some kind of a stamp behind that people recognize you for what you've done and what you've tried to do. Half of the time you see people not trying to do something because they've already decided what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah. There's a lot of premeditation that goes into this. And I think one of the aspects of this industry, and specifically in the independent side of the industry that I truly enjoy is not knowing what's going to happen, right? And talking about not knowing what's going to happen, talking about, like you said, leaving a mark on the industry. How did Artist Aloud come about? You had your stint managing, you were a producer, you moved on, you find yourself at Hungama in Bombay. Then how does Artist Aloud happen? What was the thought when you guys started out?
So actually, before Artist Aloud happened, I took a sabbatical for almost 6 years because I had 2 babies during that period. But I didn't cut myself off completely from the industry. So I was freelancing, which I kind of set up my own thing, right. Which is when I did a few projects, which were either, artist album-led or content-led or management-led. So I kept myself involved. And of course, my husband used to work with this company called Soundbars at that time. So I had a lot of homegrown education on where music was going. Right. And so while I wasn't directly in that workspace, I was familiar with where things were going. Soundbars was, I think, a little too before time. So a lot of things that they did was possibly Greek and Latin to people, So digitization of content, the whole concept of monotones and polytones and all of that. These all sound like, there are some yesteryear, terminologies, but they were just about 8 to 10 years back.
Right.
So when I decided to come back, actually my first comeback in terms of work was with Dhruv Singh, who's the guy who used to do Saregama, and he also landed up happening because when I was managing one of the artists, I used to meet him pretty often. So when I said, look, I want to get back to work, he said, okay, come and join me. So I worked with him for a few months, about 4 to 5 months. But it's a production house, so they really didn't have projects, in that frequency to keep people retained. That's when I was kind of sitting at home and trying to figure out what to do and, kya karu, ye wo and all. And, my husband and me was sitting on and battling on ideas. And he's a wired guy. I think he's somebody who's always been like 5 years ahead of what India does. And he reads a lot. So there was a lot of information. And so at that time, all I understood was talent and content. I didn't know the D of digital. Whatever I knew was conversations that my husband and me used to have.
Right.
So put down this really worded presentation and, my husband was like, why don't you reach out to Neeraj Roy? He's the MD of Hungama. See if he's interested in, investing into a business like this. And I didn't even know how to run a business, to be honest. So I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And I messaged Neeraj literally on a WhatsApp, not WhatsApp at that time, it was a message on the phone. Right. And, I gave my CV through a message saying who I am and whose wife I am. Because obviously, my husband and he had interacted. And at that time, Neeraj was like, I'm not in town for 2 weeks. You can wait for me to come back or you can meet. He mentioned somebody else's name. I decided to wait. And 2 weeks later, we met. And I presented to him basically the idea of building a platform where, with Hungama's support of distribution, we can reach out to artists directly and have artists give their content to us. Because in the span from 2002 to 2010, the non-film space had pretty much died, right? Between 2000 to 2002 itself, indie pop had converted into remix songs.
Right,
so,
absolutely.
So you didn't even have originals happening in the indie pop space. But having said that, there were artists who were constantly still creating content. Either the bigger ones were not interested in the kind of deals that they were getting from labels, or, the ones who possibly wanted deals were not getting the attention.
Right.
And, they had loads and loads of content just sitting in their computers waiting for the right release. And I think what we've seen even after 10 years now is, in spite of so many platforms where you can put out your content, every artist wants some kind of a formal release. Right? That's the difference between saying, hey, check out my song on Facebook and saying, check out my song on XYZ streaming platform.
Right, absolutely.
So Facebook, Twitter, all of these are marketing tools. They cannot become the official release platform.
Absolutely.
Right? So that, I think, was our leverage opportunity. And Hungama, of course, was already pretty much spread out in terms of its reach and, its ability to do B2B alliances. And It was doing it for labels and production houses. So when I approached Neeraj and I said, this is what I want to do, he said, you know what, this is something Hungama has been wanting to do. Why don't you join the company and run it for us? And, he's one man he's always seeing things 5 years from where it is. So, his vision is way ahead. But I think for me, the biggest gratification was in the first 2-3 years, Neeraj too used to think that, okay, independent music should get its reach and numbers just the way Bollywood does. But the reality is Bollywood gets popular because of external sources. A collar ringback doesn't popularize Bollywood. It's a derivative of the popularity. So the bigger challenge here was who's going to take the onus on creating awareness of the content that we were putting out.
Absolutely.
And there was no mainstream platform that was ready to even touch them. When we launched with 30 artists. That's a good number to launch with.
Absolutely.
But nobody cared, Nobody cared. So we realized within 6 months, we're going to have to figure out how to create more awareness. So we started building our Facebook pages, our YouTube channels. But we had to do it in a very prudent manner because you cannot invest into a business like this just by saying, acha, visibility aayegi to log, consume karenge. First of all, music is a freaking challenge because people saying, music ke liye kaun pay karega, when mainstream content itself was going through so much of a challenge of consumption revenue, obviously we had to take a very prudent approach. Second, we had to do it more from a long tail perspective and look at it as something which is just going to be something you're going to keep having to hammer on, and one day it will catch on.
A lot of what you just talked about, again, I tried to do music for TVF when we were doing this, setting this up, 2015, 2016, and we faced these challenges still, right? We had a coterie of artists who had bona fide successful digital albums, right? And when I say successful digital albums, TVF released them on YouTube and forgot about the platform, right? So now we had albums which had like 10 million, 15 million, 20 million listens on YouTube, but nobody is willing to take that music video on TV. Nobody is willing to give it radio airplay. So we figured out the hard way what it means to be a creator of music and a publisher of music, right? And so there's an entire background machinery in there, right? And I think hearing from you about how you arrived at it and how Neeraj and you greenlit the whole thing, it definitely sounds ahead of its time even now to me, to be very honest, right?
Yeah.
And now, it's more and more pertinent because as a sort of indie podcast creator for myself, which is also more and more under the ambit of audio today, I don't think people know how to release a podcast, right? People don't, they have no concept of what a formal release really is because YouTube is there. I want to add a bit of a complex question here, right? And you talked about this a little bit previously as well, that nobody wants to pay for music, right? Nobody does. And it's in terms of per product success, music has the lowest success rate of all, right? You might have to release 1,000 songs to have one song that gets to 50 million views or 100 million views or whatever. How do you then plan for monetization, right? The first challenge for an indie artist remains distribution, which you kind of solve with building the infrastructure around creation, building infrastructure around marketing, with your pages, digital, etc. But how did you solve for monetization? Was that a challenge? That's better solved now than it was previously, or is it still harder? I know that's 3 questions in one, but
no, that's okay. You did say it's going to be complex, so it's okay. So, first of all, I don't think we have solved it as yet. We're still trying to solve it. We're still, just to give you an example, when I was signed on with Crescendo, I just put out a compilation album in which I had only one song. Right. But Crescendo used to pay me a stipend of 5,000 rupees per month, which they paid every year against royalties.
Right.
So at that time, even if you calculate that as 60,000 rupees or as royalty money being, deducted is a big amount. So obviously the labels were making money at that time. if you look at the current situation, the only revenue model for content is streaming, or if it's video, then it's video platforms.
Right.
The kind of revenue that comes out of these platforms is peanuts.
Easily, yeah, absolutely.
Right? That's one. Along with that, you are challenged with a consumer ready to subscribe, for a service. So a lot of times what happens is you are giving content as an artist to a platform. You are saying, I'm giving you my content. I need to make money whether you're going to make money or not, right? The platform is trying to figure out how to generate that revenue. There are only two ways to do it from a content perspective. It's either subscription or it's advertising, right? So it's a constant, task of finding ways, which is also the reason when we look at Artist Aloud today, within 6 months we realize that distribution cannot be the only part of what we do as a business, right? So from a larger, P&L and a larger sustenance point of view, it does come down to if I need to hire every resource that I need to hire, I need to be able to show business that's going to be able to take care of those costs. Where's the money coming in from otherwise? Right. In the whole boom of OTT and all, I have attended conferences where people have said, oh, no one's looking at P&Ls. It's all about balance sheet and all that. I said, yeah, but if you're showing, I remember asking one of the, owners of one of the OTT platforms saying that, but what if you are not able to sustain the investment just on a balance sheet? He said, yeah, well, you'll shut down then. And that makes sense, because when Neeraj told me Soumini join the company and run it like an employee and run it like, to me at that point, the only thing I thought is great. I'm going to get my monthly income. And that is always important to me because I have costs. I have, family that I need to support and things like that. So it's always going to be something that I have to consider before I look at the high that you get of being an entrepreneur.
Right.
So, which is why we went beyond distribution. We didn't land up putting out only looking at revenue through distribution. We extended our business into sponsorship-led activities where we were able to engage artists, in formats where we could pay them. This resulted with digital IPs. We were landed up doing events on ground. Of course, the moment we opened that up, we realized that we can't work with only a bucket of artists who are giving us music. Right. We need to then make sure artists who the consumer wants to watch and is willing to pay for is also brought in. And hence, we kind of did not tie in distribution-led talent to event-led talent.
Understood.
Which also gave us an opportunity to be a business or a platform that doesn't have to exclusively manage any artist, because if we have the opportunity to pay the artist, then great, everyone's going to come, right? And It's the inclusivity and the collaborativeness that makes the industry bigger and bigger. So if I was to say, yes, in 2010, we only thought of distribution and we thought we'd be building a distribution-based business. That continues to be the mainstay because obviously we want to, encourage more and more talent to create and to express themselves. But as a business today, we are across multiple verticals, So we built our own social media pages, which we use as marketing tools. We started building a marketing solution for artists. The logic stems from the fact is I didn't tell you to be an artist, right? You've decided to be an artist. So you are a startup in that sense, right? Now let's work together and see how we can help you make it happen.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. It's absolutely smashing. It's a bit of a like shifting the prism just a little bit and saying, yeah, you're a startup. That makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you two follow-ups, actually. First about monetization and second about identifying talent, right? You said you don't manage any talent exclusively anymore, right? It's like a open marketplace model where you have IP programming and you, according to whatever network of artists available in the open market, you choose who you bring in.
Yeah.
Now, to me, that sounds like an interesting way of creating value for the entire ecosystem, but it does have its own, a little bit of its downsides, right? And here's what I'm asking, and it's probably a creator first question in that sense, right? Even today, a lot of creators, a lot of musicians have no idea how to go about monetizing, right? And there's no one size fits all strategy. For someone, money might come from live shows. And again, live shows is a whole gamut, right? There's stadium shows and there'll be restaurant shows and there'll be college shows and there'll be buskers or whatever else and smaller programming like that, corporate and stuff like that. Then there's the entire set of music licensing. It's not just about putting it out on a platform and distribution. It could be putting it in a restaurant playlist, could be about putting it in retail, putting it in film, in ads, etc., etc., etc. So do you still retain that sort of a POV, especially for artists that you work closely with? So even though you're not sort of exclusively managing them, do you still look at these kind of alternate monetization strategies for them? Is that still part of what you try?
So, see, the content that we acquire from the artist, we do a license agreement, but it is primarily for distribution.
Right.
Having said that, yes, we do land up having artists who kind of expect us to do things beyond just a distribution piece, right? Where when you look at licensing and things like that. But to be honest, licensing is not as easy as people make it out to be. People talk about revenue through licensing and sync and stuff. Sync is a huge challenge in a country like India because a lot of times, you want to use a song because it's a hit as a part of your product integration. You're not going to do it just because you like the song. Right. You need that, and sometimes it is cheaper to make a completely fresh song than to acquire the rights. I mean, the one company that literally has found an interesting commercial model for their catalog is someone like Hungama, right? They have not really had to focus so much on creating new content because they've got a huge catalog of older content that people want to keep reusing.
Absolutely.
But the truth is, when you talk about the independent space, right? I mean, you've had some huge hits, some successes, no doubt, but they're still all in the niche category. You can't really say that you can use your 1.3 billion consumers to connect to a song just because it was a hit amongst, say, maybe even 2 million, right? So licensing is, first of all, I mean, you need to have, a team who can deliver on that. Have the network, whether it's with the advertising industry, the film industry, wherever it can be exploited, right? I mean, today, if you look at even radio, while the record labels have been able to, fight the battle and ensure that they make revenue on radio play out, if we go to a radio station and ask them to play our artist content, half of the time the response is, oh, we don't really need to pay for this, so why should we play it?
Right.
So no one's ready to touch the content unless there's all... I mean, the example that you gave about YouTube making a video hit and then TV and radio playing, I think the only example I can cite is Kolavari D.
Right.
I mean, there's been nothing else that has come out of YouTube and the others have been ready to play.
It was an uphill battle for me. It took me 3 years to break through and get it done. And we did. Except for one song. I mean, I released Bhuvan Bam's first song, Teri Meri Ek Kahani, which was a Permanent Roommates OST. That was the only one that people were like, I know who Bhuvan is. I'm going to play it on radio. But after that, it was like, I think, about 18 to 24 months of nothing. And then finally someone broke through. And
I have to ask you this. When it was played on radio, did it get the kind of airplay that a Bollywood song gets?
No, not at all. Of course not. I mean, we had probably about a week of play out, maybe 1 or 2 playouts in a day. Bollywood songs, you will have bloody Sheila Ki Jawani played 20 times on radio in a day. I mean, and that's the model, right? That's, I mean, a much larger problem with how we view entertainment and music.
But my point is, Vineet, my point is that's where the issue is, I mean, like when I was in Channel V, we made songs hits because of the number of airplays we used to give it. I mean, I remember the average airplay of any T-series song used to be anywhere between 10 to 13 times a day. And we called ourselves a music channel, so we obviously were supporting in making songs. And that's the only formula to make a song a hit, constant airplay.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, so in our case, we do look at, avenues where we are able to help the artists get more visibility for themselves. But I would say the biggest difference between us and any music streaming platform is a music streaming platform is more focused on the content. I mean, even people, when they search for the music, they're searching for the song. Of course, you have places in the music streaming app where you can listen to all songs of the artist. But, I remember Uday Bengal using this term when we were traveling somewhere for some event. And he was playing music from his phone, and he said, "So what kind of music do you like to listen to?" I said, "I like to listen to a mix of songs." They said, "Oh, you're the shuffle generation." So, it's interesting that there's a term for it, right? Yeah. But, the point I was trying to make is essentially it's something that, we're constantly trying to work with the artist and see how we can, create avenues. But from the content perspective, it's limited to distribution.
Right. Understood. I think something you picked on there is very interesting. It is the shuffle generation. It is the death of the album. It is the non-linearity of discovering new artists has become insane, right? And that's what my second follow-up is about. How do you look at onboarding new talent or finding a new slate of artists to work with, right? In the West, you have data signals. For example, Shazam, right? With about an 85 to 90% certainty, if a song picks up 3x over the last week on Shazam, it's going to be a viral hit. And they've kind of figured out that kind of data models, etc. How are you looking at discovering new artists, finding gems? And again, I want my listeners to know that while we're exposed to music only in the 1 or 2 or 3 languages we speak, there's music in more languages than are spoken in the country, because you still sing songs in archaic, ancient, medieval languages that you don't use. So the canvas is huge, right? And India, with the diversity, with the kind of expression we have, it's not an easy job to find viable, fresh, new talent, right? How do you look at that at Artist Aloud?
So, right from the beginning, we've had multiple models. We've had artists that we reach out to. We've had artists who upload their content onto our platform, but none of the content goes live or even is provided distribution unless we've heard it. So there's a certain element of A&R we play, but it's not that we're getting involved in the creation process.
Right.
We listen to the final master and we kind of identify whether we really believe we can support it. And one of the reasons for the moderation is also we only focus on original content. We don't do covers. So, we have a lot of artists who come and say, or they do land up uploading, covers of somebody else's song. So we're not here to identify talent for an Indian Idol, right? We're here to really support the talent who's putting his own creativity out and hence has an idea of how he wants to present himself, how he wants to, both from a marketing and from a content positioning. So even when it comes to genres, for example, everything doesn't get fit into pop, rock, So we've had genres which pretty much get defined by the artist.
Right.
And that becomes like a metadata for the content. So I think this search for talent is an ongoing process, and, we use multiple sources. For a long time, it has been, from a distribution perspective. But if I was to give you some, success points we've had is, for example, Coke Studio, season 7 to season 10, which was produced by Strings. It just landed up being a conversation with Faisal and me where on Facebook he was like, "Hey, do you know anybody in Hungama?" I said, "Dude, I work there." And I had interacted with Strings when we did Jam in Channel V, which was like in 99. So, this conversation happened about 8 years later. And he was like, "Oh, great. So let's, discuss." So we released and distributed across our network, and the same thing happened, with regard to M.E.V. Bantai.
Right.
I don't know him. I didn't know him personally, but the team knew him. And they reached out to him and said, "Okay, great. We'll take your, we'll put out our content through you." And, everybody knows what a big hit he is.
Insane.
It's just been, so we've had, I think, like they say, the 80-20 model, right? Out of 100, you'll have 20 which will actually get the numbers. The 80% need to be there because how do you show a base of 100 otherwise?
Right.
But yes, I think, we try our bit to ensure there's quality content, and it is not a UGC platform per se. People can put their content up directly, but it's something that goes through a level of moderation. And now I'm super excited and it's taking time, but we're revamping our website and our app, and if everything goes well, I hope in a couple of months we're able to release it. There's a lot of things that we are aiming to build through that, in terms of content, consumers, in terms of artist to consumer, in terms of monetization as well, considering, the new normal that we're talking about. And, for us actually as a digital company, it's interesting, the last 5 months has made us do things that we should have anyway done, because we were digital. But I think the fact that there's no other way to do it has made us now think even more innovatively. And I mean, again, a lot of credit to Neeraj because, he's so visionary and he keeps kind of giving us a lot of push. Like, guys, we need to, keep kind of, moving the ante per se. But the only thing that I would say is a consistent philosophy is that we want to support content across languages, across genres. And now we are hoping through our platform to also encourage original content from all other art forms as well. The only criteria is that it needs to be original. So even if you're a dancer, you need to have original music as a part of it. We don't want to get into this, you're coming and dancing to Bollywood. I'm not saying that's not dance, but we're not the platform for that.
Yeah, and it has its own challenges as well, right? Licensing and all of that.
Correct.
I really like the way that you kind of talked about the philosophy, because that was going to be my next question, the philosophy in the pandemic. But you covered it. I think overall, I know it's super unfortunate that the pandemic has happened and there's a lot of people suffering, but as a culture, it's given digital content consumption and creation the push that it needed, I'm pretty sure, right? As it has in terms of making people more efficient in the workplace with meetings starting on time. That's just like massive, right? Let me ask you this. I'll pivot away from... let me pivot away from Artist Aloud for a second and talk about you. You're also an author. Tell us about your books. I mean, it's very interesting to see someone dabble in multiple art forms. And I'd love to know how you decided to turn author, what your inspiration for writing is.
Yeah, so I think somewhere, I can't really say whether I am inspired to write on a constant basis, but this book that I put out, which is the Disha the Challenge, was something I wrote while I was pregnant with my son. I think it was the hormones. I definitely don't want to get pregnant again to be able to do that. But that was a period where I landed up writing at least 2 or 3. I mean, there were 2 scripts that I wrote, and it also happened that I was, because I wasn't working at that time, so I was kind of surfing on the internet, and I found this software or a solution that helps you write scripts in a particular, script format. And it just got me excited, and I started writing because, it literally helps you to kind of structure your screenplay and dialogue.
Was this like Celtics?
I don't remember what it was because Yeah, something like that. Because 2-3 years later, when I tried to find it, I couldn't even remember what I had looked for. But I think it was just stars aligning at that time. Right. So, it just kind of flew, the whole idea, the concept. So Disha the Challenge was, it's obviously a fiction story. After that, there was another one that I wrote called Pyar Mein Pagal. So that again became, there's a little bit of, there's romance in each one of them. Then there was another story that I had written, which was literally on the space of, 7 musicians and their life and what happens. So, which, I don't know, it's ready and available. If someone's interested in making it a web series, I'd love to talk to them. So I won't call myself an author per se, although I've carried that on my Twitter handle. I think I do a little bit of writing when it comes to, when we're working in the office, we're working with so many ideas and concepts, just sometimes just the right name for that IP or, it just comes naturally. So I think, it was just fun to do it. And in fact, I can tell you the one part of what we've been building in the whole marketing services that we offer to artists, pretty much my own experience, which I had with Partridge, because Partridge allows you to do self-publishing, right? And basically you pay for everything. So, but they help you with the process and, they help you make the design
the best
of cover. They
help support and all of that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, of course, I wasn't too keen on going all out, but I still keep getting emails from them saying, hey, we'll give you a discount on these many books and you can, but in the current scenario, obviously I'm not going to invest in buying books and then selling them. But it was never about the money. It's just the opportunity of putting it out, which was very exciting.
I love it. I think I have mad respect for people who may or may not consider themselves to be authors as their sort of first vocation, but mad respect for people who can finish a book. As someone who's tried in my life, and I have a couple of drafts and manuscripts here or there, people who finish a book I have just mad respect for, right? Good, bad, quality, writing, grammar, style, all of that comes secondary. But the fact that you sat down, you had a start and a middle and an end, and you put it down together, I think there's a little bit of beauty in that entire process. So that's fantastic, and I'm sure.
But I have to tell you this one, Vineet, which was it's very special. That's why I want to share it. It may sound like I'm kind of blowing my own trumpet, but I knew. I know Rishi Kannan, right, from Radio 1, and I reached out to Rishi Kannan and I said, I want to. I want you to feature me in in any of your shows, and would you be able to do that? And he said, I'd love to, Soumini, but you'll have to send me your book. Let me read it. And he said, I do the same thing with anyone, and then he kind of mentioned about Salman Rushdie as well. He said, even his book, I have read it and only then featured him. So I sent him the book and he reads it and he says, I loved it. And let's talk. So then I went over to his station and I did almost like a 1-hour interview, and it was so special. I still have the audio recordings, and
that's so lovely.
Yeah, so I think I don't know how many people have even read it, or I haven't even bothered to go into the back end and check any data. But I think it was a very special book, a special story. So if it has a life of any other opportunity, I'd love to tap it, but I don't have the bandwidth to actually chase that. And of course it takes a lot of effort. It's not something you hear a lot of people saying, I never wanted to be this, but I became by chance. I think there's an effort in everything you do. I think it falls into your lap.
Absolutely, you have to struggle and strive and put it together. It is indeed blood, sweat and tears in more ways than one often. Let me ask you this, Soumini, just about to wind this up. Obviously, there's a very vast and varied experience that has gone into getting you where you are today. And congratulations on 10 years of Artist Aloud. And I'm sure the next 10 are going to be smashing for you guys as well. As someone who's a leader in entertainment today, as someone who's been around, as someone who intimately understands this space on both the business and the creative side of things, what would be your advice to young people who are entering this career? And I've asked this question especially to people who spend a significant amount of time and have done some amazing stuff, and there's a little bit of commonality or a little bit of similarity in their advice, but I'll come to that later. But yeah, I'll that's my question to you. What's your bona fide advice saying, yaar, ye karna or ye mat karna?
Okay, so I think for someone who wants to get into the career of music, in terms of being a part of the backstage experience, and backstage, what I mean is not only from a performance perspective, but just behind the scenes. I think first thing is that you have to believe and have the passion for it. You can't take it as a job. The moment you think it's your job and it's 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, and I'm not saying that you need to not have a personal life, but I think the importance is for you to keep yourself absolutely connected to what you're trying to do. That's one thing. Second thing is you've got to keep educating yourself. Getting yourself aware of what's happening. And I may say this and it doesn't mean that I know it all. I'm still constantly learning. I think I've had a crash course of 10 years of digital in Hungama, to the extent that today if somebody tells me, "Arey, ye nahi ho sakta," at least I can correct them saying, "Have you thought of it like this?" Because the beauty of anything in life is if you have a logic to it, it is doable. Whether it's interacting with people, whether it's building a product, you talk about every product that people use today, they have thought of people's psyche and logic and not about any kind of rocket science to it.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's Uber, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's any of these platforms. The third thing I believe is you've got to be honest, and again, I don't want to sound like this really pure, halo on the head, but I think it's important to understand that you've got to try to be honest, and at least being honest does not mean that you have to be naive, It's just that you need to have the authenticity to be direct and clean about your approach. Have a conversation. I am somebody who really believes in paperwork. I don't believe in this. I hear this a lot even in my company, and a lot of people, "Arey, usko bol diya." Bol diya matlab kya? We all live multitasking lives today. Between our children, our family, our jobs, our houses. you've got to put yourself in the other people's shoes to understand that if you're going to forget something, so can the other person.
Absolutely.
Right? And the idea to put it down on paper is not to so that you can screw the person, when the time comes. It's just to have a record of any conversation that's happened.
Absolutely.
So I think for young people, that's very, very important because, it's the young generation a lot that I see today who are just ready to, say, I tried and that person didn't respond, or I have done it and, I did my bit. Now it's on my problem.
The way I like to look at this is there are people who consider sending an email the end of work.
Right.
Right? To which my response is, but it's not. That's like saying, मैंने आपको काम दिया था, तो मेरे आपको बोलने से काम खत्म हो गया. ऐसा तो हुआ नहीं ना. Right? Just because I told you do it doesn't mean my job is over, right? It's not over till it's over. So go ahead and do it. The other thing that really struck me when you said honesty is not naivety is absolutely true. I think there is an assertiveness, there is a confidence in honesty. And those are dimensions of honesty that we tend to sort of neglect and say, "Haan, nahi, ye to bola hai." That kind of thing, right? But I think that's just gold. To be honest, to be direct, to know what your limitations are, and if you don't know it, ask for help. Maybe. I love the way that
one more thing, Vineet, I'd like to add here, which I think, especially since you mentioned for the young, lot. I don't want to sound very old, but yes, I'm 45, so I think I am old now. But the reality is, a lot of things that people don't understand is when you do any job, any kind of work, 80% of it is follow-up.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
80%.
Could not agree.
And that is where people tend to kind of lack. And again, none of these things that I'm saying means that I have mastered it. I am still constantly working at improving. I think one of the things I've learned in a big way in my company, and I'm still learning it, is people management. I've had, ironically, a lot of people from my team who've left. Some of them have left in a very, very negative, harsh way. I would say at least 80% of them have come back, either becoming very good friends, or they've come back and they've apologized, say, can we come back? And it's just that, I just feel in that moment, people, emotions get better, whatever. But I think at the end of the day, if we have one agenda, in the music space, if I was to say, if you want to be somebody who wants to be remembered for what you brought into the music business, that should be your driving force.
Beautiful. I think you put it very, very nicely. And I resonate so much with that follow-up bit. I can't tell you. And just to add to Soumini's wisdom there, follow-up isn't a one-time thing. You have to follow up every day, every week, every month, right? It's a way of doing things. It's not a task, right? I think that's the way to look at it. And Aaron Sorkin, there's an Aaron Sorkin dialogue about decisions get made by those who show up. And I think follow-up is you showing up every day, saying, okay, what happened? Did it happen? If it didn't happen, how do we do it? Just massive wisdom there from Soumini. My last question to you. It's something I ask all my guests. I want you to share with my listeners a piece of entertainment. Could be a book, a movie, a song. These days, young people have memes, so it could be a meme, could be a video game. But maybe one, maybe two pieces of content, or three, maybe if you like, which are close to your heart, which have been maybe important to you as a consumer or as a producer, something that you hold very dear.
So, whenever I think about it, the first thing that comes to my mind always when I think is Truman Show.
Lovely.
I just love that film, just the concept of it. And yesterday, actually, my son and me were watching Inside Out. And I was just thinking, just the concept, I think what excites me is when the concept, when it comes to, films and stories, I think the concept is what that completely attracts me to it. And then, of course, the treatment. When it comes to music, I have actually been totally agnostic to any genre. So I think that's been kind of the manifestation of what our platform is about. But melody is a huge kind of a pull. It's interesting. So I'm a South Indian. I'm married to a Punjabi. Right. And somewhere, when I listen to Punjabi music or I listen to Tamil music, it just, I think just the roots kind of make me feel connected to it. But I'm someone who actually, I don't think I've really had one particular, but Truman Show is one film I think I can watch again and again. I just love that movie. It's beautiful.
Yeah, great movie, very sort of pertinent in these times as well, a little bit.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this before I let you go, though. Are you like more of a melody person, more of a lyrics person?
Okay, I think I'll be kind of, getting myself into trouble here. But I think melody is the first thing that, but, sometimes you hear some songs where the lyrics, I think for me, simplicity in lyrics is what gets me, way more connected to it. Sometimes you hear songs which have so much of, meanings which you're going to have to derive at. It all depends on your mindset, right? But I think in the kind of lifestyles we are leading today, the less you've got to kind of break down something that you're listening to or watching, the better it is. Because it is meant to be entertaining. It's Absolutely. Not meant to be science.
Absolutely, that is true. I mean, when you said about it coming together, the way I like to look at it, and I'm a like a distinctly lyrics person over melody, but of course, melody is everything when it comes to music. But I like to listen and think about it sometimes. But I love it when vocalists use words as an instrument, as opposed to a message. For example, Masakkali, the song. Right? The vocalization almost makes the vocal more of an instrument as opposed to someone singing over other instruments playing. But just a couple of thoughts.
No, I think it's interesting. It's a different perspective. So
yeah. Love it. Thank you so much, Soumini, for making time.
That was good.
Yeah, that was lovely. I hope you had fun. Thank you so much for making time on this lovely Saturday afternoon. That's it to my listeners for this episode of Storytellers and Storysellers. This is Vineet Kanabar saying goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. Some really fun guests on the network this week. Cyrus welcomed Dia Mirza to come and have a conversation about all kinds of different things. Danny Morrison was on Edges and Sledges, the cricket podcast. If you haven't heard that, that's always a fun listen. And Rahul Subramanian was on Football Should Fall to grow their ever more exciting list of guests. And it's not just that. Mantra Mugdha, old friend of ours, was on Advertising is Dead. Manu Pillai was on the Filter Coffee podcast. It's been one great guest after the other. And with that, we hope to catch you again next week.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, a show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.